about why we needed the Voting Rights Act at all. And just briefly for people to understand, this was a set of congressional districts in Alabama where even though Black voters in Alabama are about 14% of the population, they were able to basically choose the candidate of their picking in, I believe it was 7% of the districts. So there was this gross disparity between voting numbers and power in congressional districts. I might have gotten those numbers just slightly wrong. But what the Chief Justice said is that looking at these maps, this is enough to say there's a likely violation of the Voting Rights Act because they were drawn out of political power.
And so, when you say the Voting Rights Act still has teeth, and what was surprising to you is because there have been sort of previous rulings that seem to sort of chip away at the power of the Voting Rights Act.
That's exactly right. So back in 2013, Shelby County, the court famously gutted half of the Voting Rights Act. That was part called Section 5, and that dealt with certain jurisdictions that had a history of discrimination, had to check in with the federal government before they made changes to voting laws. They basically said in that opinion a decade ago, don't worry, we still have Section 2. But they've had some decisions along the way that have frankly made it harder to lodge some Section 2, again, vote dilution on the basis of race, in part, claims. And today, I think they really said that's not a steady march to erasing the Voting Rights Act, that it does have teeth. It will still prevent states from doing what Alabama tried to do here.
So Chief Justice Roberts wrote this opinion. As you know, Jessica, the three liberal-leaning justices ruled with him, and the more conservative Justice Kavanaugh joined the decision. What do you make of that ideological breakdown?
So I think that this is a grouping that we should be looking for in the future. Obviously, I think not when it comes to issues related to reproductive rights, but when it comes potentially to issues about voting rights, or at least when the statute is clear when it comes to voting rights. I thought one really important and interesting part of the opinion, which obviously I'm still looking at, was that the Chief Justice said, we're rejecting what Alabama wanted, which is to say, we used race-neutral criteria in drawing these congressional district lines, and that's enough. And the chief said, no, the voting rights really requires, that act requires that we look further and we look to see if you have diluted minority voting power. And that gives, again, a lot of strength left in the Voting Rights Act. I thought what was really interesting is that the Chief Justice also rejected Alabama kind of pushing to say, well, maybe the Voting Rights Act, because it requires us to consider race, maybe it actually even violates or is in tension with the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. And in my view, again, based on a quick reading, that was just absolutely shot down. And what the chief was saying here is there is still a role for that landmark 1965 piece of civil rights legislation.
All right. So is it significant that the Chief Justice wrote this opinion?
I think it is significant. He, in this case, would have had the power to assign the opinion. And this is a chief where he cares about what we think about the Supreme Court. He knows that the Supreme Court has been through, well, I think their approval ratings, let's be honest, are historic lows. And he doesn't want to be the Chief Justice who essentially is captain of a ship that goes down. And he understands that the Supreme Court is only able to function because we respect it. Let's remember, they don't have an army, they don't have a military, they have the power of the pen or the keystroke. And he understands that if we really think that they're illegitimate and we stop adhering to their decisions, then we essentially don't have a third branch of government at a certain point. So I think he wanted to be the one to come out there. And in my view, it's almost a bit reminiscent of the big Obamacare decision, where reporting was he changed his vote at the last minute. He voted with the liberals. And I think part of it was, I think he really believed in the legal decision, but part of it, I think he's understanding where the Supreme Court is in our society. And he wants to make sure it doesn't just look like a political body.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. Jessica Levinson, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, smog from the wildfires in Canada are still causing dangerous air conditions in much of the Northeast. We're going to have team coverage throughout the day, so stay with us on that. You're streaming CBS News.